carry you into excess. Learn the laws and obey them. That is very much like the message Jesus gives to those who he has liberated by his death and resurrection. Jesus gives us our true birthright, spiritual freedom. But that freedom isn't an excuse for disobedience. It forms the basis for learning and obeying God's laws. It gives us direction and action. So as we continue in chapter 23, we find God gives us ideas about festivals and worship. He basically says the Sabbath laws are not to be taken... I corrected it in your notes, and I forgot to correct it in mine. I put the word not. The Sabbath laws were to be taken seriously and were for the good of the people and the land. This pertains to the fourth commandment, keep the Sabbath day holy. Now, even though as Christians we are no longer under these laws, there is still great wisdom in following them. Learning to take a Sabbath rest is essential for godly living. Let me just tell you, you are godlier when you're rested than when you're worn out. Think of how much nicer a person you are when you're well rested, and think of what a grump you are when you're worn out and tired. Ask my wife. I'm much more Christian when I'm rested, you know. I'm a lot nicer guy. Things don't tick me off as much. And I think that's true for all of us. In fact, I want to tell you, as your pastor, one of the most godly things you can do is take a nap. Right? Because when you do, you're rested. And when you're rested, you're a much nicer. You can handle temptation better. You can handle all sorts of things better when you're rested. Now, that doesn't mean I want you to be all Rip Van Winkles. But understand you need to have a balanced life and you need to take care of yourself. In the New Testament, we can see the constant struggle between the teachers of the law and Jesus, because Jesus often chose to do good on the Sabbath, such as healing a person's arm. Now, you read the laws here, you're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath but worship God. Well, Jesus, in a sense, I think, was worshiping God as he healed people. But listen to the way the Bible puts it. Mark 2, 25 through 28. Do we have it up there? There we go. Cool. Jesus said to them, haven't you ever read in the Scriptures what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God during the days of Abiathar, that was high priest, and broke the law by eating the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests are allowed to eat. He also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even over the Sabbath. Here's what Jesus is saying. It's not about the law as much as it is, the Sabbath was given to you to help you, to keep you healthy, to keep you rested, to give you strength. If you're burning the candle at both ends 7 days a week, you're going to be one ruined individual at some point. So it's important to take the Sabbath seriously. Number 2, here God instigates 3 national holy days for his people. Notice I said holy days and not holidays. Do you know where we get the term holiday? It's an abbreviation of the phrase holy day. Think about that. These feasts usually last an entire week. These people knew how to party. Okay? You know, they didn't have Christmas Day. They didn't have Thanksgiving Day. They didn't have a birthday. They had the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That only meant that they couldn't eat anything with yeast in it. But everything else was wide open for consumption. And let me tell you, those clever Jewish people came up with some great stuff that didn't have yeast in it. Each of these feasts would coincide with the sacrifices for sin and for bringing an offering to the Lord. Each man was required to bring something before God 3 times a year. Their giving served a twofold purpose: to give God priority over their possessions. One of the reasons why it's important for us to tithe and to give is not just to support the church building and the pastor and all that, but it is a personal worship discipline. You surrendering to God the portion that He asks for. You allowing yourself to say, God, I'm going to let you even be Lord over my money. And the second part is to feed those who served in the tabernacle. And later, those same people who would, if you know, the Levite tribe never got a portion of land. It was always, they took care of the temple. The rest of the tribes were to bring these offerings into the temple so that the Levites could have a portion of the inheritance of the promised land. So just the same way you pay me a salary, which we tend to see more as a business deal these days rather than a covenantal relationship that as you give to God, God takes care of those who spiritually take care of you. There's a relationship here in giving. But I also want you to know you get your pastor at a 10% discount. Because I tithe too, out of my own spiritual discipline. 3 festivals to celebrate. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, which took place in the month of Abib, which was the month that they were rescued from slavery out of Egypt. The Feast of Harvest, which I always find a little bit weird why they named it like that. Why don't they call it the Feast of Sowing or the Feast of Planting or whatever? Because the Feast of Harvest took place at the beginning of the planting season when you planted your seed. And then the Feast of Ingathering was when you actually harvested the stuff and you brought it all in. Okay? So, I guess it's the Feast of preparing for the harvest, and then the Feast of we've had a harvest. So, they had a week off before they did all their planting, and they had a week off after they brought it all in, and they partied. They had feasts for an entire week. Number 4, every man must come before the Lord with an offering 3 times a year. Usually at the feast time, and they would bring their first fruits, your very best. It kind of bugs me sometimes when people bring their cast-offs to the church and want us to have it for them. In other words, this wasn't good enough to be in my house, but you can put it in the church. That kind of bothers me sometimes. If you want to bring a sofa and put it in the church, buy a brand new one, you know? Is that radical talk? I'm sorry if that offends you. You know, it just seems crazy that we get everybody's cast off and not the best. When the Bible says when you come to give a gift to God, you bring your very best. Every time. Not sometimes. Every time. Okay, let's kind of wrap this up. I'm at letter D, God's part of the covenant. And here's where I wanted to focus on the scripture a little bit. And I wanted you to see this text. From chapter 24. Are we up to that? Yeah, that's the next thing. Go ahead and go to the text. So we're going to go from chapter 24, verses 1 through 18. And you'll kind of note that I underlined and bolded certain things. And what I did was I went through and I underlined and bolded all the people involved in this whole chapter. Because I want you to understand that there was Moses, there was Aaron and his 2 sons. I love their names. Nadab and Abihu. Nadab and Abihu. I think somebody should name their kid Abihu someday, you know, just for fun, or Nadab, or whatever. But the idea, those 4, and actually we find later on in the text that Joshua is mentioned, and so probably Joshua is there as well. And so we find that and then there's also the 70 of the elders or the leaders of the people of Israel. So let me read it. You follow along, you can pick it up. Then the Lord instructed Moses, come up here to me, and bring along Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of Israel's elders. All of you must worship from a distance. Only Moses is allowed to come near to the Lord. The others must not come near, and none of the other people are allowed to climb up the mountain with him. Let me stop there for a second. Remember that when God spoke to them and they were terrified, I have a feeling no one's arguing with God at this point. Because I think they were pretty freaked out that first time. Number 3, then Moses went down to the people and repeated all the instructions and regulations the Lord had given him. He repeated it all. All the people answered with one voice, "We will do everything the Lord has commanded." Let's make that a little bit more alive for us. Would you say that phrase with me? We will do everything the Lord has commanded. There's a promise, a declaration. Then Moses carefully wrote down all the Lord's instructions. Early the next morning, Moses got up and built an altar at the foot of the mountain. He also set up 12 pillars, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent some of the young Israelite men to present burnt offerings and to sacrifice bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Moses drained half the blood from these animals into basins. The other half he splattered against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant, which he just wrote down, by the way, and read it aloud to the people. Again, they all responded, all together now, "We will do everything the Lord has commanded. We will obey." Then Moses took the blood from the basins and splattered it over the people, declaring, "Look, this blood confirms the covenant the Lord has made with you in giving you these instructions." Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel climbed up the mountain. Now, I want you to see this verse. There they saw the God of Israel. I'm sorry, up to this point, I was thinking no one's ever supposed to see God and live, right? I had to really search out some commentaries. Bottom line is, they say it's a vision of God, not Him in person. It's a vision. They saw the God of Israel. Under His feet, there seemed to be a surface of brilliant blue lapis lazuli. Anybody know what lapis lazuli is? It's a stone. Okay? It's a blue stone, as clear as the sky itself. And though the nobles of Israel gazed upon God, He did not destroy them. In fact, they ate a covenant meal, eating and drinking in His presence. God didn't destroy them on purpose. In fact, He came and they ate a meal together. I love potlucks, don't you? This is awesome. You know, God threw a banquet. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain, stay there, and I will give you the tablets of stone on which I have inscribed the instructions and commands so that you can teach the people." So Moses and his assistant Joshua set out, and Moses climbed up the mountain of God. Moses told the elders, "Stay here and wait for us until we come back. Aaron and Hur are with you. If anyone has a dispute while I am gone, consult with them." Remember, the disputes were generally when somebody stole something else or hurt somebody, or now they had the law that they could operate with. Then Moses climbed up the mountain, and the cloud covered it. And the glory of the Lord settled down on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, the Lord called to Moses from inside the cloud. To the Israelites at the foot of the mountain, the glory of the Lord appeared at the summit like a consuming fire. Then Moses disappeared into the cloud as he climbed higher up the mountain. He remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Okay.